Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So it's time to begin our next panel discussion, Partnerships for the Goals, Government, Trade and Society. As we all know, sustainability is one of the global issues that different countries and parties are working hard to achieve the goals. Fashion Summit Hong Kong has invited representatives from various countries and regions to join this panel to discuss how the goals could be achieved by involving government, trade, and society. First of all, may I have the honor to invite our moderator, Professor Thomas Wong, Chairman of Institute of International Sustainable Development, to proceed on stage. Please give a warm applause to welcome Professor Wong. And now I'll pass the floor to you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning and just now, we have heard from the trade expert telling us what could be done or what should be done. And at this panel discussion, ladies and gentlemen, I have some very heavyweight representative looking at the same thing from a different angle, from an international aspect or also local Hong Kong aspect. And the title of our panel discussion is Partnership for the Goals. And this is one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals established by the United Nations in 2015. And the official wording is, strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the goal partnership for sustainable development. So at today's panel discussion, we will look at the need for cross-sector and also cross-country collaboration. It is more than a call for countries to align policies. It is about strengthening and streamlining cooperations between nation states. So without further ado, I would like to invite our VIPs to come onto the stage. And first of all, I would like to invite Mr. Osvaldo Álvarez, Consul General of Chile to Hong Kong. He is also the President of Basel Convention, COP15. Osvaldo, please. And secondly, I would like to invite none other than our Hong Kong legislator, the On Sunny Tan. He is a member of the Hong Kong SAR Legislative Council, representing the Textiles and Garment Functional Constituency. He is also the chairman of HK Productivity Council. And last but not the least, we have Mr. Patrick Orchard. He is the Consul Economic at the Australian Consul General in Hong Kong. And most recently, he worked in the Trade and Investment Division in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, based in Canberra. Patrick, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, to start off, our vision is for improved and more equitable trade, technology-driven and coordinated investment initiative to promote sustainable development across borders. And since we must start somewhere, so why don't we start with the fashion and textile industries? So that's why we are here today. And we would like to focus and to make sure that government, trade, and the society work hand in hand to leave our future generations a better world. So I would like to invite our panelists to share with us their thoughts on the partnership from an international perspective. And to start off, I would like to invite Osvaldo. I know you are the president of the Basel Convention, COP15. And just recently, you have conducted related meetings in Geneva. As packaging creates a lot of waste and other problems, can you please share with us the recommendations or takeaways from your convention related to our topic today, primarily to ensure a universal rule-based and equitable system that is fair, open, and beneficial to all? Please, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to this wonderful seminar. What a lovely building, I have to say. fantastic. I really appreciate this venue. So, being the president of the Basel Convention, I don't know if you are aware with the Basel Convention, but inside the UN system, you have the environmental program, which is the UN entity that takes care of the environment and invites governments to regulate in order to preserve the environment. Inside the environment program of the UN, as a sort of umbrella, you have many legally binding documents that are ratified by numerous governments, of course on the area of the environment, the protection of the environment, but ultimately the protection of the human health. So one of those conventions is the Basel Convention. And the Basel Convention regulates hazardous wastes. And it regulates transboundary movement, but it also regulates the disposal of hazardous wastes. And just to give you an example, Basel Convention is not very well known, but I'm sure all of you know about the Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Biodiversity Convention, the Desertification Convention. All of those conventions are in the same kind. Let's say all of them are under the umbrella of the United Nations Environment Program. So, in a way, this topic today is very relevant because most of the packaging that the fashion industry produces becomes waste. And then there's a sort of regulations according to the Basel Convention that governments have to implement. Now, the issue of plastic, and I heard the last speaker that he talked a lot about plastic. So the issue of plastics is something that has become very much a topic of awareness in the international sphere right now. Governments are worried about what to do, and especially those governments in countries that had a very long coast, which is my country's case, and of course is Australia's case. In China, of course, and Hong Kong being an island surrounded by water, of course, is an issue of concern. So in 2019, in COP14, the governments that belong to the Basel Convention, that are most of the governments, I think we have already 189 parties, which means 189 countries that belong to the Basel Convention. So in 2019, they introduced new entries to the annexes of this convention in order to regulate plastic waste. And they classified in the different annexes. I know this is very technical. If you have a question, just raise your hand and I will explain it for you. But the Basel has 9 annexes. In those annexes will classify waste, to make it simple, as hazardous or non-hazardous. Those that are hazardous, they are subject to the prior informed consent procedure, which means that if my country manufactures X product, and that product produces X amount of waste, and I want to export that waste to a third country, that third country will have to give the manufacturing country their consent before being able to export that waste. And that also has a complication nowadays because of one amendment that the Basel Convention had back in the day, but entered into force only a year ago, which forbids OECD countries like ours to export waste to a non-OECD country. And this amendment was basically done because we are aware that most non-OECD countries don't have the facilities to properly dispose of residues or waste. Therefore, that's more or less the explanation. The inclusion of new substances into the regulations, mainly plastic. And also, the Basel Convention has developed what is called the Partnership for Plastics, which is a strategic alliance between companies and governments, and of course, the Basel Convention Secretariat, let's say the bureaucracy, the administration, in order to promote circular economy. And I think most of you have heard that term, which has become very fashionable right now, circular economy, that nothing becomes waste, but it comes into a circle that either you will reuse or you will recycle. So, two things. One is regulations to governments that they have to apply if they become part of the convention. And then the other one, the launch of a partnership in order for governments and companies or private sector, as well as NGOs that take care of the environment, to cooperate among each other. And one last thing is that, you know, Basel is not a treaty, an international binding agreement that touches into plastic. So the governments in the United Nations Environment Assembly last March decided to commit, so they made a decision that is binding to start negotiations in November, this coming November, to have a specific treaty on the regulation of plastics. And I think that's the most, well, we had one like 10 years ago regulating mercury and regulating, in effect, actually eliminate mercury. But now the big thing is the regulation on plastics. And this is most of the governments are keen on having an agreement. Of course, everyone has his own pace. You know, most of the, European governments, plus Norway and Switzerland that don't belong to the Union, but they're very active in the environment sphere. They really want to have this agreement, but our countries as well. Not in the same pace as they would wish, but probably, I would say without hesitation, that every government that I have talked to, or colleague of mine that I have talked to, is towards, is to say, as I said before, is keen to have an agreement on the regulation of plastics. So you see, there's a lot of things going on in the international arena, and of course, as long as you have a plastics agreement, less will be put into Basel, but now Basel is in effect, and the other one still has to be negotiated for probably Minamata, which is the one on mercury, took about 5 years to be negotiated, and then another year to have all the ratifications to entry into force. So at least we will have, Basel regulating plastics for the next coming years. So there's a lot of things going on, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you, Osvaldo. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not every day that we can meet and hear directly from the president of Basel Convention, COP15. And he has just brought us some good news. He mentioned that in the last COP14, it was 189 countries. I just did a rough calculations. That is 98% of the number of the countries covered by United Nations. And they are paying attention to what we are talking about today. So this is very encouraging. So Osvaldo has just now helped us to think not only out of the box, but out of Hong Kong, out of Asia, but from an international arena's perspective. But since we are in Hong Kong today, so my next question will be to our Hong Kong legislator, the Hon. Sunny Tan. Sunny's business or family business is also in the fashion textile business. So, and we always say that Hong Kong is an international city. Hong Kong is where East meets West. So, Sunny, can you share with us how well is Hong Kong or our trade is doing by international standard? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. Thanks to Create Hong Kong and CETA for putting this very interesting event together today. I think this is a very important message of an initiative jointly by the government and the industry in promoting eco-friendly packaging. So I think this is a very good step. Okay, now maybe allow me to explain a little bit maybe from the industry perspective. How we see the eco-friendliness of packaging or maybe in general on sustainability. Many attendees here, you're all from the industry or maybe leaders of the industry, so some of things you may know already, but maybe I will summarize it in a way that I can share and putting into perspective. Hong Kong has been very much into textile apparel since the, I would say, 60s, 70s. And prospering and then eventually moved to China and moved to Southeast Asia. So if you're looking at the absolute numbers of contributions of textile apparel in Hong Kong right now, maybe it looks a little bit small. But in reality, that's not true. If you are looking at the sub-industries across our textile and apparel, we are still taking on a very substantial role globally, not only in Hong Kong, but globally. We have the fur federations here. Our fur production, I think it's one of the top in the world. We have the best sweater companies or groups that is also global standard. Our handbags manufacturing, okay, top 3, I would guess accounts for maybe more than 50% of the key affordable luxury brands. Okay, more than half. I can continue to name. Maybe we have one of the best, the largest market share for lingerie, bras. We are a strategic partner to some of those biggest brands, let's say Victoria's Secret, for example. So you can see that may not be happening in Hong Kong, but those are all Hong Kong-based headquartered companies operating globally. So that is one part that we play a substantial role in partnering with key brands globally in US and with Europe mostly, because in the past, I think these are the 2 key consumer engines coming up with all these very successful brands. Continue on. We'll also see that Hong Kong plays eventually a bigger role in terms of building their own brands, either investing into brands or build their own brands. Like 20 years or a little bit ago, we see the Giordano, the G2000, the local brands prospering, and they're still running. And we see the Esprit. Some of you may not know that, for example, we are strong financial backers of Tommy Hilfiger, okay, Michael Kors. Silas shall funded them. So our reach to brands is more than what we have expected. In Hong Kong also, there are over 100 some listed company just purely on textile and apparel. And so we all have to understand that we may not look very strong, but in reality, we are very, very strong. I'm sure a lot of our leaders here, they have all the connections to all the CEOs, COOs of those major brands. So we do have a say, or some say. Now, the problem is like this. I think eco-friendly packaging, to us, we always will say one thing, is out of our control. Because the customer decides how it's being packed. That's the problem that we have all the time. Having said that, I would say that as a key partner to brands, we do have the ability to communicate with our customer, the brands, to say that there are certain things that we would love to do, there are certain things that we would like to propose for you to do. And one important concepts that we, our company also, our group, uses is to see how we align the strategic direction of our customer in terms of sustainability. So what we are trying to do is to help our customer to solve their problem. We are not trying to say that, oh, we should go sustainable, improve our sustainability, better packaging. No, we sell in the different package. Okay, we do eco packaging, we also have the customer packaging we have to do. It's more about selling them. We are helping you to improve your corporate social responsibility, and this is how we are doing it. This is our option. So this is an area that I would say that we as a corporate, we maybe as a federation, we are working on it, and I think we should do more. Another area that Hong Kong is developing right now would be our designers, our local brands. In addition to the G2000 or Giordano that I brought up, but we have a very talented group of designers that they are building up their business. And I believe that as the awareness of the eco-friendliness packaging continues, we should be performing as a leader in demonstrating how we can showcase the different types of eco-friendliness packaging. And before I finish on this question, I think another interesting point that I would like to share with you all in addition to packaging is labeling. Some of you might have heard the digital labeling. Have you? So in the past, we all have maybe 3 or 5 layers of label because the country requirement to say that how you take care of your clothes, right? But now industry is advocating maybe a QR code that you just scan it. So just one label, one little place, it shows everything. So it reduced the labeling, which is also being more eco-friendly. So I'm seeing that industries are working very closely with our partner meaning our brands, and also partner in the sense that, for example, in the US, I would say the key driver might be the American Apparel Footwear Association. So we try to work with them because it must be an industry-wide initiative.
Thank you, Sunny. I'm very happy to hear from what you just said, because from Sunny, not only Hong Kong is a place where East meets West, Hong Kong is a key player in the industry. And not only that, we are doing quite good with our designing and digital labeling. So thank you very much, Sunny. And with that, I would like to go to Patrick. And that is after hearing from the president of Basel Convention, COP15, after hearing from a Hong Kong legislator on what is being done locally and internationally, I would like to ask the Trade Commission of Australia. I know your country is known for innovative and practical actions on sustainability journey. If possible, can you please tell us what Australia is doing on eco-friendly packaging? Perhaps not necessarily restricted to the fashion industry, since we might be able to learn something from other industry, other trade as well. Patrick, please.
Great. Can you hear me there? Yep. Thanks, Thomas. Thanks for that question. And thanks for having me here today. It's, as Osvaldo said, it's a beautiful building to utilise. So I thought I'd start off my remarks at a bit more of a higher level in the macro sense of what Australia's done recently in terms of sustainability and net zero. And one of the key big decisions in Australia has been that we've recently agreed our emissions reduction target, which is a 43% reduction in emissions by 2030 with net zero emissions by 2050. And that brings Australia in line with countries like Japan, South Korea and Canada. And in order to meet those commitments, we're starting to see the rollout of a number of regulations and policies across the various levels of government in Australia to start spurring on innovation and investment in emissions reduction across a number of sectors, so energy, transport, construction, urban design and agriculture. And I think it's important here that it's to understand that it's not just government's jobs to set that regulation. There's a partnership there with the private sector and civil society who play together, working together to sort of create an enabling environment to make change. So on packaging specifically in Australia, and this is a good example of that, the Australian government, so that's our federal government and our state governments, are working together with industry towards 100% sustainable packaging by 2025, and that's as part of the Australian Packaging Covenant, which is called the Covenant. And the Covenant is a national regulatory framework that sets out how governments and businesses across Australia can share the responsibility for managing the environmental impact of packaging. So I'll just read you the targets that are set out. So by 2025 in Australia, we're aiming to have 100% reusable, recyclable or compostable packaging, that 70% of plastic packaging is being recycled or composted, and 50% of the average recycled content included in packaging, there's 50% of average recycled content included in packaging, and that's been revised up from 30% in 2020. And we're phasing out problematic and unnecessary single-use plastic packaging. And these targets were something that were developed in partnership between industry, between government, between civil society, so that everybody's on board and you've built a consensus to drive forward to reach those targets. Targets are tough, and we've set ourselves a bit of a stretch. So by way of update, we're about 86% the way of achieving the 100% reusable, recyclable packaging, but we're still only 16% of the way towards 70% of plastic packaging being recycling. So there's some challenges there. But I think as part of those challenges, there's opportunities for business, and there's opportunities for the whole life cycle of the packaging system to work together, and that's including academia, entrepreneurs, and government as well. And so some of the innovative things that are coming out of Australia at the moment are, there's a company called Planet Protector Packaging who have developed a wool-based alternative to polystyrene wrapping that's proving to be very popular, and it has some of the thermal insulation qualities that keep things temperature regulated. We've got a company called Great Wrap who have developed a potato starch base alternative to cling wrap that goes around pallet packing. So that's a fantastic way to sort of be a bit more sustainable in the packaging space. And one of our big Australian headquartered companies, Amcor, was one of the first global packaging companies to pledge that all its packaging would be recyclable, reusable or compostable by 2025. So I think when we set these ambitious targets and we work towards them, there's opportunities there for innovators to fill that space and to make some fantastic products. But I also think we need to think about packaging as part of a broader supply chain story as well. So looking for, and that's government and industry working together across transport and ensuring there's sort of sustainable and net zero transport options. I mean, it's a big issue for the fashion industry, moving garments around the world, sea freight, and moving to green sources of fuel for that. And then there's green cities and built infrastructure, and as well as providing the infrastructure to allow people to recycle the products, the sustainable products that are being, and packaging that are being developed. So that's just a few of the things that we're doing in Australia that I thought I'd share today.
Thank you, Patrick. I think we have just heard some very tough and very ambitious targets, especially related to packaging. 2025. Wow. And as Patrick just mentioned, he mentioned more than once about this partnership on government, trade, industry, and civil society. This is exactly what we are talking about. This is exactly why we're here today at this session. So, Osvaldo, my next question is to you. We have just heard from Australia. They are doing so much and they're doing a lot, contributing to the planet and to our society. I understand that on the other side of the planet from Australia, your country, Chile, is also leading the way and has implemented some new regulations to ensure everyone is doing their part. I heard that these new regulations work pretty well and attracts the eyeballs of some other governments. Can you please shed some light on this, please?
Sure. So it's very similar to what Australia has been doing. And so 3 years ago, let's go back a little bit more. So about 10 years ago, our government really established a connection with the environment. And they started with a more active approach on protecting the oceans and the environment. That today has translated into what they call the turquoise policy, meaning not only a green policy or a blue policy, but the mix of the two. So when this whole new idea about protecting the environment was put into regulations, our Congress adopted a statute on the extended responsibility of the producer. That means that every importer of clothing or textiles will have to make themselves responsible for all that is put into waste because of their imports. So this is how we do it. We extended to the producer the responsibility to recycle, reuse, or properly dispose. Now, that's the statute. You need to bring that to the base, and that means that the Ministry for the Environment has to regulate with, the local normative for the central government as well as the regions. So that is a long process, it's not an easy process. So for that you need to take an inventory, because you need to know how much waste you produce from whichever sector. So they finished that process. And so now, I think importers of clothing and textiles, and as a matter of fact, we have a couple of retailers that are very well known that make their garments here in Hong Kong, China, Vietnam, and the countries of the region, and then they bring them back, and they're stationed here. I mean, they control their operations from here, which is quite interesting. So that is the first part. This is how the government makes, the importers to contribute to the protection of the environment. Now, as my two other co-panelists have said, you need the commitment of the private sector. And of course, you will need incentives in order for them to comply, because you don't comply because it's just a statute. You comply, and I think is actually much better from the point of view of the society, that you comply because there's a commitment to the protection of the environment and human health. So we have some incentives in order for them to comply. Now, this time around, and this I'm going to just go a little bit away from your question and just to let you know, I think big companies not only in textiles, but big companies in retail, even those that are packaging producers, the makers of those packaging, let's say Tetra Pak, for example. All these big companies have become aware of that they need to contribute to circular economy. And they have been organizing themselves, prior for everybody to regulate on the same issue. So this is a trend not only for governments, but we have seen from the global point of view that all these huge companies are already committed to what probably we will have in the future, which is a circular economy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Osvaldo. I think Osvaldo has brought up a very important message, and that is about the extended producers' responsibilities. And that is very important. So I would like to go back to you, Patrick. And from what you just have shared with us, Australia seems to be working very hard and very smart, in using technologies to provide solutions in a sustainable fashion world. But do you see other opportunities, especially on the vision of coordinated investment initiative across borders?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I was looking up the United Nations financing roadmap to net zero, and that sort of laid was pretty stark. That sort of said that the funding required to achieve the targets that we set ourselves are largely going to have to come from the private sector. The public sector has a role to play, but engaging the private sector on this is going to be very important. And I think in terms of coordinated investments, Hong Kong has a unique role to play as an international financial centre, and there's sources here of international capital that it can deploy. And that Hong Kong is developing a suite of green products in the financial space and looking for investment opportunities around the world to be able to tap into that. So I think that there's some really opportunities there. In Australia, less that as a source of capital, but we're a source of ideas and opportunities. And I think, we've seen that traditionally in our energy and mining industries around green hydrogen, green steel, critical minerals for batteries, which are also going to be really important to moving towards a net zero economy. But I think looking at some of the entrepreneurial activities that are happening in Australia, we've got a number of sort of fintech, medtech, health tech, ag tech companies that are doing really well. And we've got a very strong linkages between entrepreneurs and our academic institutions, and being able to sort of tap into those. And I think some of the examples of the companies that I mentioned before are great examples of that, of using academic research and science to develop a product that achieves these sustainable packaging roles. So I think in Australia, in terms of looking for investment from our side, looking into new recycling systems, plastics collections, packaging design and innovation, and they're sort of the main things. And I also think that outside of, I guess, the coordinated investment, there's an opportunity to sort of share regulatory approaches as well, and looking at what other places are doing around the world to encourage sustainability, and putting in place some of the measures that make it easier for both producers and consumers to do the right thing. Breaking down some of those barriers where it becomes, this is a bit too difficult and things like that. I think making it easy to be able to be more sustainable and sharing those regulatory approaches is really important as well.
Thank you, Patrick. That is very interesting. So Australia seems to be connecting finance, academias, and industries so that they can all work together to help to make this a better world. So I'm mindful with the time, so I think I have time for one more question to my panelists, and then I will open the floor to. I will open the floor can ask questions after that. So please get ready for your questions. But before that, I would like to ask Sunny. And that is, now that we heard from the president of Basel Convention, COP15, and their recommendations, and we have also heard how Australia and Chile are doing this. So coming back to Hong Kong, what challenges or opportunities do you see? Moreover, I mean, Hong Kong as a society, how could we do more?
Thanks, Thomas. Not an easy question, but I'll try to answer. As I said before, the packaging primarily is driven by the consumer, because the consumer must be supportive of the brand or pressuring the brand in executing more eco-friendly packaging. We can see some examples, especially for the sports or sports leisure brands. Their customer base has a very strong belief of what is behind the brand. And for example, let's say just privately, Adidas, Nike, or some outdoor activities company, let's say North Face, Patagonia, they are touching the nature. So they are very careful. They care a lot about eco-friendliness. So they know that the customer, the consumer cares. So they want to win the brand by echoing what the consumer believes in. So what we need to do at the very first thing is to bring up the awareness. That must be done jointly with the industry, with the NGOs, with the government. We know this is the right thing to do. The problem and the challenge right now as a manufacturer is when we perform the costing, okay, the BOM. It says that, okay, if you are using the eco-friendliness packaging, the cost goes up by 10 cents. Okay, but for a lot of big companies, they care about that 10 cents. So how do we convince them that the 10 cents could buy you customer loyalty? But it's difficult to translate having a direct formula to say that, okay, I am spending, let's say, 100 million units. So that could be like 10 million US dollars, think about it. But then the 10 million US dollars is well spent because you earn your customer, for a consumer, for example. So this is one area that I think is challenge and opportunity, because if you can do it right, you win your customer. Okay, so that is one area that we as a Hong Kong brand, we as a Hong Kong service provider, manufacturer, how do we partner with brands to make it right? And we believe that this is the right thing to do for our environment. Another thing is, I think, joint partnership. As I mentioned earlier, we have the partnership with NGOs, but then regional partnership is also very important because we do not only operate in Hong Kong. So how about the producing country, our factories in Southeast Asia? How do we also partner with their local NGO, partner with the government to create a bigger noise? Okay, this is also very important. And when we go regional, we can also go international. As I mentioned that, okay, I used to be the board member of AAFA, American Apparel Footwear Association. So as Hong Kong companies, Hong Kong owned, we call Gongji, right? How do we become more active in those communities? Because we will be interacting with their senior executives. By doing that, they know that we are the strong force behind them that we can count on. We can be involved. For example, I downloaded some document from AAFA. AAFA has a sustainability committee. Okay, they talk about packaging. They talk about digital labeling. Where's our voice? How can we be part of it to make it happen? So I think we, as a very strong player in this industry, we all should have a duty to do that for us and for our next generation. Last thing that I would like to bring up is really China. I think throughout the entire conversation, we have not touched on this word. I would say that this is definitely a non-political issue. So we should also use our strength to engage our China counterpart. It could be government, local government, Chinese brands, and those Chinese brands are getting very strong now, right? The Anta, the Li Ling, Peak, 361, those are strong athletic brands. Okay, they also need to win the consumer. The new generation of the mainland Chinese consumer I do believe that they care about the environment. Okay, it's different. So how can we also having the strength to partner with them to win the consumer to them? And China side also the regulation or the standards. How do we make sure that they are actively participating in these global initiatives, but as well as the standards definition can be all more standardized so that we don't have different kind of standard, different documentation for it, just to make it easier. Last points, I would say, go back to a higher level. I would say that in our fashion, textile, apparel industry, we are one of a very big polluter. Okay, let me explain to you why. When we make our textile, when we dye our products, all these things are really having a lot of pollutions. We are changing now. Also, the carbon footprint of making the cotton in Xinjiang or China, and then you make the fabric in China, you do processing somewhere else, and then you make the garment in Sri Lanka or somewhere, right? So how do we make it more eco-friendly? Lastly, I think we have a lot of discounted, unwanted items that's left around the world. That's why you can buy some bargains at like 10 cents to $1 for a piece of garment. Why? Because we always have mismatch on what can be sold and what is not being sold, unpopular ones. So with digitalization, we are matching the data, getting all the data closer so that we can make what the consumer really wants. We are using technology on digital printing. We are shortening the lead time. Using colorless, no, not color, it must be colorful, waterless, not colorless, waterless printing to make sure that we are protecting our environment. And I can see that we as an industry, I've been seeing a lot of initiatives going on, and packaging definitely will be one of them. And again, I would like to encourage you all, we are the driving force and believe in ourselves. We will make a difference.
Thank you, Sunny. I heard a few key words. First one is awareness, which is very important. And the second one is consumers, because they are the motivation behind the brands to change. The third one is costing, because that is important to manufacturers. The first thing they think of is costing, whether, because this would affect their profit. And then I heard another keyword that is partnership, whether with the other producing countries in East Asia or internationally. And then another keyword is China, which is important consuming market, manufacturing market, and also a key player in our industry. And then the last keyword I heard is pollution. So before I open up for questions, when I do panel discussions as a moderator, I always like to ask my panelists to sum up the session with 1 or 2 or 3 sentences so that we can all have some takeaway with us. So may I start with Patrick?
So I guess for me, the key takeaway here is partnerships, and that's partnerships internationally, that's partnerships between government and civil society and the private sector. And I think that the message that I'm hearing today is that we all really need to work together. This isn't a problem that just one party can solve. It's globally, it's an issue. In each country, it's an issue, and we all need to work together to achieve an outcome.
Thank you. Sunny, please.
I think it will get shorter because I agree. But I think more importantly, believe in ourselves, that this is a journey. It won't happen overnight, but it would happen step by step. And it requires all of us to work together.
Thank you. Osvaldo, please.
Then I agree with you both. Yeah, partnerships is what makes the world go round, right? You can have regulations. If you don't respect those regulations, there's nothing to do about it. It's not for the sake of having regulations, everything gets better. You need to convey the message and try to, incorporate the private sector and the civil society into what you think will make the world better. I know my topic is quite as I was talking to Patrick in the beginning, arid, because in a way has been interesting that I've been, involved in environmental negotiations for about 15 years now, and I came to Hong Kong. I landed in Hong Kong, and then I would say one of the complications of Hong Kong is that belongs to China, and China is the one that actually goes to all these international meetings. But we have APEC next month, and I hope, Hong Kong being a member of APEC, we will see that some of this agenda is also getting into the agenda of all these leaders. So, but I was thinking to get the people of Hong Kong more aware is perhaps talking someday to HKTDC and bring one of these international meetings to Hong Kong. You have a fantastic convention center, and then you will see how these governments work together in order to protect human health and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Osvaldo. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic today is about partnership. And I think our panelists have just shown us what good partnership is all about. They all agree with each other. Yeah. So I'll open up the floor for questions. So who would like to have the first question? Yes, please.
Thank you. I guess my question's more directed towards Hong Kong, so it will be towards Sunny. For me personally, I think it's just, in Hong Kong, the city in general, being efficient is very important. And being sustainable and environmentally friendly, to a lot of people, a lot of times it's not efficient. So it's not convenient, it's not efficient, they choose not to do it. And sadly, that's just the reality right now. Even though a lot of people are aware, I think being aware and actually caring is two separate things. So in that case, and the other thing I want to say is, in Hong Kong, recycling for us, it's not easy actually, even in household. To recycle bottles, paper, glass, plastic, etc. I've even gone to the point where I've brought stuff down to recycling, and the cleaning lady at my complex will say, just throw it all in one bin. It doesn't matter. We're going to throw it all away later. So I think the government input here in Hong Kong locally, it's very important, and we need more to see more of it from the government side. So I guess not so much a question, but a request to our legislator to ask our government to do more.
Maybe I'll just respond quickly on this. It's a journey. I would say that to a certain extent we are behind in terms of being more eco-friendly or recycling, environmental. We are behind our neighbor countries in terms of policy, in terms of the practice, awareness, and culture. So these are the joint efforts that we need to work especially closely with the government. Create Hong Kong funded this seminar. It also is a step that demonstrates that the government is doing something. Is it enough? No. I share the same problem. When I hold, let's say, a can of Coke, how do I anticipate when I'm going to find a recycling bin? Because if I cannot anticipate, I will end up throwing it into a trash can. That's the human nature. So there are a lot of detailed works that we still need to work together. But again, every one of you, one of us, we are important. We need to bring up the awareness, and we need to practice and to figure out, then we will find the solutions. It's not easy. I'm confident with the new administration because I've been meeting them since the beginning of July, and I'm seeing that their slogan of really action, key performance indicator, I can feel it. So I hope that that also applies to this area.
Thank you, Sunny. Any more questions? Yeah, please, Osvaldo, please.
But I would say, on the other side, I think I kind of share what you say, but also I have seen, I've been here 3.5 years, and in the last year, there's an awareness that has come to the people of Hong Kong that I didn't see before. For example, you're a big consumer on gadgets, electronics. I mean, it's easy. You travel on the MTR and everyone is on their cell phones. Old, young, everybody. I was, surprised once when I took the MTR from Tung Chung and there were people, catching Pokemons and they had like 4 or 5 cell phones and so on. Okay, so to the point, not to use up your time, but what I'm trying to say is now Hong Kong, for example, has, e-waste points in different neighborhoods in the city when you can bring your unused gadgets and they will be disposed properly. So, for example, the big thing was, what do you do with all this e-waste? And they have a lot of components inside that are dangerous, that are hazardous. So now, look around your neighborhood and you will see that there's a e-waste disposal point when you will know that if you bring your old monitor, your old keyboard, your old cell phone will be disposed properly.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, one more, please.
Yeah, this is also a question for Sunny. Because you mentioned about quite a lot of independent local fashion talents. And I know quite a lot of them have been trying to create their own sustainable brand, but it's not easy. As you know, using sustainable materials is actually quite expensive. And you need quite a big amount of maybe fabric or the materials in order to produce one small collection. So during the pandemic, actually a lot of them couldn't even come up with a substantial collection, as I know, some of my fashion designer friends. So are there any, because the panels actually mentioned a lot of partnerships, the idea of working together. So are there any ideas or suggestions you can make to bring up these young brands in Hong Kong?
Sandy, please.
Let me market something for Create Hong Kong and Design Center, right? Because Hong Kong Design Center does have a designer incubation program, FIP, and DIP and FIP fashion incubation program. These are the programs that has been funded by Create Hong Kong in terms of supporting the designers. I just had a meeting with them yesterday, and I see that materials is a very challenging area for developing our designers. The MOQ is a problem. Selection is a problem. In terms of making samples is a problem. Costing is a problem when your MOQ is very high. It happens to everyone, every single designer, not only in Hong Kong. But how do we minimize the effect, minimize the problem? I would say that it requires further partnership of the designers with manufacturers in Hong Kong. I noticed designer community is not as closely linked with the production manufacturer community, and we need to do more. Some will have closer relationship. I know, for example, I don't know enough about fur, but then I know, for example, for the sweater side, there's some closer ones working whole garments, for example. But then we need to get closer partnership because I have a fancy idea that can I sell a social responsibility project to big corporation? How come this gentleman is gone? Because I want to pitch to Richard. For example, can we have manufacturers adopt, so quote unquote, adopt designers and allocate some production space to help? Can we combine some of the material quantity? Can it be done? I really don't know, but we need to think about something, and hopefully if I can think of 10 solutions, maybe one could be workable. Okay, so that's the kind of direction that all the associations, we need to come together and feel that, okay, we should support local talents, local design. Let's figure out what and how we can make it happen within our industry and also with the support of the government. In fact, we were just talking about FIP. One problem that I noticed is really fashion designer, they are very good at design, but they are not a good merchant, because merchant not only look at the product itself, but also look at the cost. Okay, but when you look at the cost, do you have a source, the relationship with suppliers? Do you know how to make it right so that it fits the consumer? All these kind of things has to come together. So without a definite answer, but I think we are working together, and I hope that it will just get better and better. Last thing, I saw Hong Kong RETA. I also visited Hong Kong RETA. And eco-friendly recycled materials is one of the key initiatives of Hong Kong RETA. I also advocated to Edwin, the CEO, that not only that we need to make it working in terms of the product, become a successful lab-based product, but it has to be commercialized into a product that the pricing can be worked out. And hopefully we can have that in mind, and the first groups of trials can be going to the local brands and local companies.
Thank you, Sunny. I see that time is up. But before we end, may I invite you to thank our panelists, but one by one. Let us give a big hand to Patrick. And then another round of applause to our Sunny. And of course, all the way from Chile, Osvaldo. Last but not the least, how about our lead sponsor, Create Hong Kong, without whom we won't be sitting here today. And especially to Miss Yun. She has been sitting here for the whole afternoon. We need this kind of support from our government. And of course, don't forget, we have our speakers here today. Karen, a big hand to Karen Ho as well from WWF. And a wonderful, wonderful and powerful speaker from KPMG, Pak Nim Wu. Lastly, I would like to invite you to give a big hand to yourself. Typhoon is already here, and you are all sitting here with us today. So a big hand for yourself. With that, I would like to say thank you, and thank you.
Thank you, moderator.